5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
What do you think, Marge? All I need is a title.
Before we get into the meat of our subject today, the implosion of the Democrats over the impeachment of President Donald Trump, let's take a look back at the history of impeachment, its many uses, and how it has affected the presidency and our society over time. Since U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that the Dems will move forward with the articles of impeachment, since they have the votes to pass these articles, and since the administration is actually daring them to do it, we will count the Trump impeachment as a done deal, for purposes of our discussion for the moment. Counting Donald Trump, impeachment has been used a grand total of 3 times, and has removed exactly 0 presidents. Now I hear you typing already, what about... First let me explain. The first impeachment started with this guy. No, not because Abe Lincoln did anything wrong, but because of this, which then allowed Andrew Johnson to come to power. Andrew Johnson, by most accounts of the time, was a rather gruff individual who had a hard time getting along with people. Along with that, he backed policies that his fellow Republicans disliked. Johnson supported the more lenient policies towards Southern Reconstruction that his predecessor had felt best. All of this made him very unpopular in Congress, who set up an impeachment trap by passing the Tenure of Office Act in March of 1867. President Johnson did not like this law, and it was passed over his veto. The Tenure of Office Act was specifically designed to protect the office of Edwin M. Stanton, the then Secretary of War. Johnson wanted Stanton removed from office, which was against the law. When Stanton was removed, the U.S. House threw that charge into basically a bucket list of grievances and approved 11 articles of impeachment against Johnson. The scene then shifted to the U.S. Senate, where they voted on 2 of the articles, defeating them both before adjourning, considering the entire matter a farce by the U.S. House to unseat a president that they did not like. The impeachment of Andrew Johnson has a good number of parallels to today. During the 1972 presidential campaign, a group of burglars broke into the offices of the Democrat Party at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. Because most of these people were stupid, they left evidence that the break-in was happening, and this was spotted by guards at the hotel complex, who then called in the police. Details of the cover-up, its operations, and the investigations into it, which led much further up the chain of command, are extensive. However, in the end, by the end of July of 1974, President Richard M. Nixon was facing 3 articles of impeachment. He resigned on August 9, 1974, before the U.S. House could impeach him. In the 1990s, the presidency of Bill Clinton was shaken by numerous scandals, including a shady land deal, billing records at a law firm, sexual favors performed in the Oval Office, and lying while under oath. It was this last scandal, tied to the sexual trysts of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, that led the U.S. House to adopt 4 articles of impeachment against the president. Once these articles were sent over to the U.S. Senate, they failed to convict Bill Clinton, and not only did he serve out the full 2 terms that he was given, he emerged from the presidency a very popular man. And now we have the probable impeachment of President Donald Trump, and let's be clear about what this is about. If the allegations are correct, on July 25, 2019, President Trump, in a phone call with his counterpart in the Ukraine, asked for a favor, that being a Ukrainian investigation into a Ukrainian oil company named Burisma, and a member of its board of directors, one Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden just happens to be the son of Democrat presidential contender Joe Biden. In return for an investigation into Burisma and an announcement on that investigation, the United States would release roughly $400 million in military aid to the Ukraine, and there might be a meeting in the White House between the two presidents in the future. On this surface, this looks like bribery, which would be an impeachable offense. However, it does not take a lot of scratching at the surface of these allegations to see that there's a whole lot wrong with them. There are other videos on YouTube that go into greater details on this, but for our purposes, we can say that the process has been as fast as Congress can move on something this big, which has been in and of itself an issue in the entire process. It's been happening too fast. Well, at this point, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that the Democrats should move forward with articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump, in a move that is basically designed to placate the far lefty portion of the Democrat base. While this move may seem to be the right one now, and for rather short-sighted reasons, in the long run, this will turn out to be another victory for Donald Trump and the GOP, at a time when it will have a much larger impact on the 2020 election race. One of the things that all of the constitutional law people up on Capitol Hill yesterday did not consider was the fact that at the time of the building of this Constitution that Donald Trump is said to have been flaunting, there were no political parties. No Dems, no GOP, no Whigs, no nothing. Political parties loosely started in the aftermath of the Washington presidency and developed over time into what we have today. Also, impeachment itself is a fairly weak instrument. It gave Congress a very difficult means to remove a president, as evident in the fact that President Trump will be the third president in our history to be impeached. But none of the four were removed from office. Richard Nixon resigned before the U.S. Senate could remove him, while Bill Clinton and Andrew Johnson were exonerated. In the case of Donald Trump, it is looking as though the U.S. House will vote on articles of impeachment, and while some Dems in purple swing state areas might get peeled away, the Dems have enough of a majority in the U.S. House to get the articles passed. Then it goes to the U.S. Senate, where the GOP controls things, and once there, two things can happen. Either impeachment will start quickly, if it starts at all. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell may simply never schedule the matter, or it may be a slow and grinding process that slogs into the spring of next year, during the heart of the Democrat primaries. This is where the Constitution meets the unforeseen political parties we have today, because what might be good and fun for the far lefty Democrats in the U.S. House, people such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Al Green, Maxine Waters, and others, may very well play badly in the districts that the Dems need to win in the fall of 2020 if they want to have any hope of winning over the U.S. Senate or knocking off a president that they have hated since before he took office. The Constitution's impeachment process and the modern political parties do not have nice borders with each other, and that's just a freaking fun time for anyone interested in this process. So let's go back to the process of the U.S. Senate. Everyone figures that most of this, from the passage of the articles of impeachment in the U.S. House to the trial in the U.S. Senate, will go a certain way. It will sail through the House, but stop dead in the Senate, and everyone knows it, which reveals that it is a purely political and partisan move by the House of Dems. They will be able to crow about having spoken truth to power, of having served justice on behalf of the American people by impeaching the president. Yet after this dies in the Senate, they'll still have to work with the man. They may not like it, but at that point Pelosi can say, hey, you got what you wanted, it is now time to move on to something else. And before we go any further, Al Green has said that they can impeach the president multiple times, which is technically true, but politically very stupid. Anyway, the process then moves to the Senate. Mitch McConnell can do the trial in any number of ways. If he goes with the quick path, which I would not suggest doing, the trial could be over quickly, the damage all around could be limited and light, and the Senate can then get back to doing other things, like passing laws and putting Trump appointments into various judiciaries throughout the country. In other words, winning! The slower process is much more fun. First off, it won't even start until January, even if the U.S. House passes the articles of impeachment before Christmas. Second, the GOP will have control over calling witnesses, and those witnesses should be legally compelled to report to the Senate and testify. If they don't, they should be nailed with contempt of Congress charges. People such as Joe Biden should not be able to get away with stating that they will not report to the U.S. Senate. They should not get to pick and choose which house of government they will grace with their presence. If they feel so strongly that Trump must go, then they need to put in some of the work to make that happen. However, even if people such as Biden do not show up, the GOP-controlled Senate can have people read materials into the official record. A senator from whatever state can act in their official capacity to reaffirm what we already know about the Bidens, Burisma, and corruption in the Ukraine in general. This will be like aerial bombardment. You don't necessarily have to be at the target's location to do some damage. And to say that this will not come up on the campaign trail is to not be realistic, especially for those who are trailing Joe Biden. Sure, they might all rally behind the Dems in the Senate and try not to mention it much, but debate moderators would not be doing their jobs if they did not mention the biggest story in the country to some of the people who have been bitching for months that Trump should be impeached and removed from office. And by the way, this does not begin to consider the chaos that will happen when the candidates who are U.S. senators have to return to Washington, D.C. to attend impeachment hearings in their capacity as jurors. Such fun during the Democrat primary season. In the end, this will implode spectacularly and do immense damage to the Democrats and their chances in 2020. The American people are barely following this, and they do not want to see Trump impeached or removed from office. The economy is booming, and we are more secure now than at any point in recent history. Trump has largely kept his promises, and he will do much more in a second term, which is what the Democrats are so afraid of. But unfortunately, the Dems have nothing, and so knocking the other guy down is the only game they have, and it is a losing one. It is interesting. When impeachment has real charges and is not carried out in a partisan manner, it works. Jonathan Turley, in his remarks before the House Judiciary Committee, said that there was no good time for an impeachment. I disagree. The impeachment of Richard Nixon was the correct time to go after the sitting president. It was unfortunate and time-consuming, but Richard Nixon had obstructed justice in his actions against the Watergate investigation. However, the other two times impeachment has been used, it has been covered in partisanship. While Bill Clinton obstructed justice, he was not thrown from office, and he survived to be even more popular than before. In the case of Andrew Johnson, he violated a law specifically meant to catch him in an impeachment trap, when he removed the Secretary of War against the wishes of the U.S. House. They filed 11 articles of impeachment, only for Johnson to be exonerated in the Senate, because they figured out that this was a bullshit move. The message from both Jonathan Turley and past impeachments is clear. Watch what you are doing, and proceed at your own risk. I think the Dems will ignore all of this and fly themselves off the nearest cliff, and it'll be fun to watch.